Welcome to This Week in Christian History, a podcast from the Center for Christian History at Mississippi College. The Center for Christian History is dedicated to expanding knowledge and understanding of Christian history. Our mission is to provide a scholarly, unbiased look at the events, figures, and movements that have shaped Christianity over the centuries. You can visit centerforchristianhistory.com for daily historical highlights. And each week on this podcast, we'll do a deep dive into key moments with Christian history's leading authorities. First up on our list of historical highlights for the week is the arrest of Alexander Solzhenitsyn, a fierce critic of the Soviet government and its oppression of the Russian people. After being accused of undermining Joseph Stalin's regime, Solzhenitsyn was arrested on February 9, 1943, and sentenced to years of imprisonment in the Soviet labor camps known as the gulags. During his time in the gulags, he came to faith in Jesus Christ. Following his release, he exposed the reality of Soviet totalitarianism through his writing. He won the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1970 and received the Templeton Prize in 1983. In his acceptance speech, Godlessness, the First Step to the Gulag, Solzhenitsyn warned that the same moral and spiritual failures that led to communist oppression in Russia could also develop in the United States. Next up on our list is Cotton Mather, born on February 12, 1663. One of the most famous authors of the 1600s, Mather wrote a detailed account of the Salem witch trials and was a key founder of Yale University. He also followed in his father's footsteps and pastored Boston's Second Church. Last up on our list of historical highlights for the week, and the subject of our deep dive, is Saint Valentine. Valentine was not likely a singular figure, but a composite figure, shaped by overlapping martyr traditions from the late Roman Empire. Early sources describe a priest in Rome and a bishop from Terni, both remembered for preaching Christianity under persecution, performing healings, and ultimately being executed. For centuries, Valentine was venerated primarily as a healer, especially associated with curing epilepsy, not as a matchmaker. The connection between Valentine and romantic love developed later, beginning in the Middle Ages through poetry, most notably by Geoffrey Chaucer. Today in our deep dive, Nick Walters, founder and director of the Center for Christian History, talks with Lisa Bitel of the University of California, Dornsife about St. Valentine.
Hello and welcome again to yet another episode of This Week in Christian History, and we are talking today about Valentine's Day and Saint Valentine. And was he a real guy? And what's this all about? Is it kind of like Saint Patrick? Are they same? Are they myth? Are they legend? Who were they? How were they? And we're glad to have as our guest today Dr. Lisa Bitel, who is a professor of history and religion at the University of Southern California. And do we say Dornsife? Is that the name? Okay, that's the college that is where all the good humanities folks get to go hang out, right? Is that how that works? So thank you for joining us today. We really appreciate it.
I'm happy to be here.
Absolutely. So tell us a little bit about Valentine and Saint Valentine in particular. What time frame are we talking about within the greater Christendom that we should be paying attention to?
Well, first I got to tell you, St. Patrick was a real person because we have documents that he wrote, but we have no documents from Valentine. So as I said, the jury's out on Valentine.
Okay.
What we have is stories about 3 different guys around 200 who were all named Valentine, Valentinus.
Okay.
And a little bit of background on that, Rome in, I don't know, the 5th century, so the 400s, the 500s, the church had just become not only legal, but the state religion. Christianity was the state religion of the Roman Empire. And they were trying to build churches wherever the faith went, wherever it expanded. And they were trying to establish the history of the faith from the start. And so in a Rome that was kind of crumbled and invaded and depopulated, they knew there were saints, martyrs buried all over the place. And they knew there were stories circulating about these guys. But there really wasn't a lot of straightforward, trustworthy information about a lot of these saints. It was
Wow.
a matter of digging, collecting stories, making assumptions, maybe finding bodies in tombs. So Valentine was one of these figures about whom at least three stories circulated. And we know this because the Jesuits, the Bollandists, who collected notes on saints in the 17th century, found these three stories, these three guys.
Oh, wow.
So
Okay.
three Valentines, supposedly living around 200 plus. One apparently was a general who fought in northern Africa and got slaughtered with all his troops. They were Christians. So not much to that story.
No, that's
The other two are kind of alike. One was a priest from Rome, and one was a bishop from near Rome, from Terni. And they both have the same sort of background. They both were proselytizers. They were trying to bring more people into the faith at a time when Christianity was illegal still. And they supposedly lived during the reign of Claudius Gothicus, called
okay.
Gothicus because he spent only 2 years as emperor fighting Germans up in the north.
Ah,
Um, but
fighting the
supposedly,
Goths, right?
yeah,
I
the
mean,
Goths.
that's where that would have come from. Okay.
Yep. So supposedly during his reign, there was a crackdown on Christians. And Valentinus, whether bishop or priest, was caught up in it, arrested.
Mm.
And so we have two slightly different stories about what happened to each of those Valentinus's guys. And I'm happy to tell the story if you like, or
Oh,
just
yes. No,
quick.
we want to say, but just for clarity's sake, when you say they were a bishop in Rome, they weren't the bishop of Rome, or
Oh, no, no. And the
this is
bishop
not the
was
Pope,
from,
right? Right.
no, it's not the
Okay.
bishop of Rome. The bishop was from Terni. The guy in Rome was a priest.
Gotcha. Okay.
So, a covert, sneaking around, holding Christian
Sure.
gatherings, stuff like that. So, this one who was a bishop from Terni supposedly was arrested for trying to be, a proselytizer, make people Christians. And this is only coming to us from the 400s or 500s. So he was summoned to Rome because word had got round that he could cure people of this, what was called the falling disease. And,
Mm.
saints were attributed these healing powers sent by God to sort of show people the strength of Christianity. So he gets sent for by a scholar, a rhetor, a sort of professor, philosopher guy, to cure his son. And this guy runs a school with a bunch of visiting Greek scholars. And Valentinus is staying with him, and he says to the rhetor named Cretan, I'll cure your son of this falling disease if you agree to become a Christian. And so Valentine spends the night with the boy, praying over him, Chiron. And the next day, Chiron gets up out of the bed, hale, hearty, perfectly cured of what we think probably was epilepsy. Um,
Interesting.
and so suddenly everyone, Cretan, his family, the servants, and even the visiting Greeks decide they'll become Christians. And the Roman Senate hears about this, sends in the troops, takes Valentinus away, beats him up and beheads him, kills the rest of the family. And when the Greeks try to take his body back to Terni, they get beheaded too. And so
My gracious.
that's one Valentine. You ready for the next
Oh
one?
yeah, the message has been sent, right? And it was loud and clear.
Yeah.
Don't go down this road. Did you guys forget that this is illegal around here? And just in case
Exactly.
just by association, right? I mean, you're in trouble.
Yeah.
Right.
And
Wow.
remember, somebody's writing this story at least 200 or more years after this supposedly happened.
Hmm.
So then the third Valentine, who was supposedly, I think, buried in the Via Flaminia, this is a Valentinus who's a priest at Rome, and he's arrested for preaching Christianity. And he's brought to Claudius Gothicus, who probably wasn't in Rome really, but in the story he's brought before the emperor. And the emperor says, okay, I'm going to put you under house arrest with this aristocrat named Asterius. And Asterius, if he can convert Valentine from being a Christian, would be made rich. But of course, you know what happened. Valentine arrives at the house and he starts preaching the minute he gets in the house. And this guy, this Asterius, has a daughter who's ill. She's blind. And so the same sort of thing happens. If Valentine's God could open her eyes, he'll convert. And he's thinking, no way, this is going to happen. This guy's just talking all the time. Let's tell him to cure my daughter. So Valentine prays that she can see the light. And there's a metaphor here. And she opens her eyes and looks around. She's cured. So Valentine starts baptizing the household right and left. Everybody gets Christianized. 44 new Christians.
Wow.
Supposedly the emperor finds out and has them all thrown in prison, and Valentine is beheaded. So either way, he loses his head. So these are the stories that were written a couple centuries after he lived. And, Valentinus was a very popular name in the Roman Empire. A couple of emperors were named Valentine, Valentine.
Right, yeah.
So it makes sense there were a lot of Valentines around. It just doesn't make sense why there were two guys with similar stories who were supposedly St. Valentines. With their days of death in mid-February.
Okay.
Their saints' days, their feast days on the same day. So later on then, after we've established there is a Valentine and he might be this one guy or this other guy, he gets a reputation supposedly for helping lovers. While he's in prison, supposedly Valentine passed messages between Christian men and women who were in love, or between imprisoned Christians and Roman soldiers who were, somehow he becomes this sort of interlocutor of love rather than an interlocutor of prayer. But it's not in the earliest sources. And then there are scholars who say, oh, wait a minute, Valentine's Day, the 14th of February, that was an old Roman holiday, Lupercalia, on the 15th, the Ides of February. It was a day to celebrate the founding of Rome, when supposedly this cult of young men went to the place where, the story of the origins of Rome, where Romulus and Remus were two brothers fostered by a wolf, and they sort of conquered the territory, and Romulus became the one who created Rome. So it celebrates that event. So the young men would go to the place where the wolf nursed the two brothers, and they would have rituals, and they would sacrifice a dog or a wolf and cut strips of the skin. And then they would run around Rome half naked, whipping young ladies and making them fertile. And supposedly there was some real shenanigans going on, between.
Go figure.
Yeah, big holiday. So, the motif develops that the Pope in the 4th or 5th century decided we're getting rid of this like skanky holiday. And instead we're going to substitute a saint's feast, a saint who presides over Christian love. But that's not true either. But it is a lot of retrospective of scholars wondering, why are there more than one Valentine's? Why does it happen in mid-February? Is there an association with earlier religion? And Valentine, his cult kind of develops. He's not a major saint like one of the apostles or disciples or fathers of the church, but he's popular in some places, and it has to do with whether places claim to have parts of his relics, his bones, or something he touched, or something that belonged to him. And in fact, today there are supposed bits of Saint Valentine all over Europe. More than one place claims to have his head. People have his heart or his fingers or something all over the place. But, the idea was that if you have a relic of the saint in your church, and you have a saint's life that proves that guy a saint, then you have the presence of the saint in your church. It makes it a much holier place. The saint is immanent in that space, and pilgrims can come and connect with the saint there, and he'll carry their prayers to God. So people liked having bits of saint.
Yes.
What got around about St. Valentine through the Middle Ages was he cured the falling sickness. He became a patron saint of epilepsy.
Wow.
Yeah, and so they thought of him as a healer of diseases. So you get to Brittany in the 11th or 12th century, and a bishop who's facing a big plague in his territory says, We have a relic of St. Valentine. We'll have a ritual parade. We'll take the relics around, and this will help us cure this plague that has come to our town. So that's the kind of thing he was famous for. No love, no lovers, nothing in the traditional cult. Until we get to Geoffrey Chaucer.
You can watch the rest of Nick's interview with Lisa Bitel by clicking the View Full Interviews button on the podcast page of centerforchristianhistory.com. This Week in Christian History is produced for the Center for Christian History by Blue and Gold Media at Mississippi College in cooperation with the MC Department of Communication. For episode transcripts and more information, visit centerforchristianhistory.com. Be sure to subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube, and follow the Center for Christian History on Facebook and Instagram. Our next podcast episode is coming next week. Thank you for listening.